everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from October 6th, 2023. And I'm recording this on April, what is today? 5th, 2024. I can never remember dates. As always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. As always, I gave you those dates because you know when this information is actually relevant, because the market is always moving and changing, as we'll see as we look at these books. Goal here is same as always. Let's see what made these books hot. Why were people chasing them? Why were they jumping in value? And what has happened to them in the market since? And what factors have allowed them to either drop back, stay the same, or increase in value? If you've been watching this for a long time, you know, for the most part, it pays off to be patient, but not always. So let's dig into this week's list and see if we can learn anything. We got 17 books to talk about this week, so let's get started with Ranger Stranger, number 1. This book hit the list because it was optioned by Kevin Hart's production company. So it jumped to a $5 to $15 book. So basically it was just a lot of sales, going for double, up to triple cover. So a lot of just interest in here, but not going for any kind of crazy amounts. It's something I have noticed. We've ripped on option books a lot. Generally, because they were jumping to $20, $30, $40, $50 and then crashing. If an option book stays in that $5, $10, $15 range, you're usually okay to buy in, because just like this one, which is still $5 to $15, they're probably going to stay in that range. You're probably not going to lose very much. We're going to call it steady and I'll be back. There was no reason to chase it in the moment, but you didn't really lose anything if you did. So next we have Department of Truth, number 1. This was obviously optioned a long time ago, but Tinian posted that he was with the writer's strike over, he was working on writing the TV show again. So that's why it hit the list. Back then, raw copies were 10 to 20. There was one kind of outlier sale that went all the way up to 40. 9.8s were 60 to 80. Now it's still a $10 to $20 book. 9.8 around $60. So on the low end of before. So we're going to call this one also steady in and I'll be back. But yeah. Department of Truth, still kind of a bargain at this point if you've never bought in. I don't know that it's really ever going to be worth a ton. We'll see. Maybe if the show is a hit, but more than likely, it's $60 for 9.8. You're going to do okay either way. Next, we have Spawn, number 1 from 1992. This is in our option area or our movie area, and that's because McFarlane said the movie's still happening in 2025. So he said, been hearing that for a decade. I'll believe it when I see it. But anyway, somebody believed it because there was a whole bunch of sales, although the value really didn't move much on this book. $30 back then for raw copies, 9.8, 150 to 175, and now it's back where it always is, which is a $15 to $30 book raw, 100 to 150 for 9.8. Non-newsstand here, we're talking. But yeah, down and I'll be back. It went right back to where the book just sits. This happens all the time. There will be something at news. Spawn will jump kind of to the upper end of its normal range, and then it'll fall back to its normal range. So, next we have Saga of Crystar, Crystal Warrior number 1 from 1983. Book I never even heard of, but apparently they're going to make a Marvel Legends toy. It kind of leaked that a image of the toy leaked, so people were jumping on it. But they were jumping on it for like $3. It was basically going for a couple bucks plus shipping on eBay back then. There was just lots of sales. So Tom and then put it on the list. Now it's a $1 to $16 book. So you could call it steady and worth it, I guess. I'm not going to call it straight cash because I feel like almost any book, like with shipping and stuff, can get to like that $15 range. But yeah, I would steady and worth it, I guess, but I can't imagine there's a lot of any kind of real value here long term. Next, we're going to have our one and only comic buzz book of the week, and that is Death of the Venomverse, number 2. First appearance of Kid Venom. I think I made a sarcastic remark about how, we never get to see new symbiotes back then. But yeah, this is just the regular A cover, not the variant with him on the cover that's actually worth something. But this one was selling lots of copies, $5 raw, 9.8s. We're going for 48, just under $50. Now it's a $1 to $8 book, 9.8, 46. So it's steady and I'll be back. No reason to have chased, but didn't really lose anything if you did. So, all right, with that, we got a few covers this week to talk about. We have Transformers #1, the 1 in 100 foil spoiler cover, which is apparently the spoiler here is, if you don't know by now, was the death of Bumblebee. I mean, he might already be back. I have no idea. Back then, raw copies were going for $125 to $190 on that 1 in 100. A 9.8 went for $350, and now it's a $60 to $110 book raw. $140 to $250 for a 9.8. So yeah, that's a trap. Borderline dumpster fire here, particularly on that 9.8 side. But yeah, Transformers #1 definitely backed up, which is what most of these Energon books have done. There's been a few specific covers that haven't, but most of them have backed up. Speaking of which, we have Void Rivals #4, the Karen Darbo 1 in 25 spoiler variant. Revealed that this character was coming into the universe. $50 to $60 back then. Now it's a $25 to $50 book. 9.8 going for $80 to $125. So another trap here in terms of value. As yeah, Void Rivals has backed up considerably. It's a cool cover, obviously a great character, but yeah, not going for all that much. Next, we have Birds of Prey #2, the Otto Schmidt 1 in 50 Black Canary cover with the bubblegum. Back then, raw copies were going for $1 to $200. Now there's only been 2 sales since the beginning of February. So over the last 2+ months, 2 sales. A raw went for $100, a 9.8 went for $150. So I'm like, oh, well, that's down and backing up considerably and all this kind of stuff is what I was thinking. But then I looked, and there's only 1 for sale currently on eBay. Or at least, unless sometimes eBay does weird things with the where you don't always get all the listings depending on how you type it in. But I typed it in a couple different ways, only could find the 1 listing, and it was for $150 for a raw copy. So did it just dry up? Is that why we're not getting sales? Or just not very many copies out there? Or people just not buying? I don't know. It's a really cool cover. I'd love to have it, but probably never going to pay these prices. So, but we're still going to call it down, and I'll be back because it is at the low end of the previous range for raw. 9.8s are in the middle of that previous raw range. So if you bought the high end of that raw range, you were paying more than you paid for the most recent 9.8. But yeah, we're going to call it down, and I'll be back. But yeah, this book appears to maybe be headed toward ghost territory, or at least somewhat hard to find. Next, we have Amazing Spider-Man #601, the J. Scott Campbell MJ cover. That's been a bit controversial. Back then, raw copies were going for $100 to $200, 9.8, $575. As this cover has just over the last few years continued to slowly climb the ladder. It gets more and more valuable every few months, it feels like. And now it's a $1 to $250 book raw. 9.8's up to $600 to $700. So yeah, we're going up and worth it. You can almost go up in straight cash at this point. This book continues to just grow and grow in value. I bought this years ago when it was pretty cheap still. I wish I'd bought the other 2 big JSC covers from this period with Black Cat and stuff. Didn't do it. So yeah, those have climbed where I'm not really comfortable with them either, but we'll see what happens maybe someday. Next, we have our 1 DC movie book for the week. And it is the same book we talked about last week, Superman for All Seasons, #1, because James Gunn talked about it. It was on the list for 2 weeks in a row. Still only doing 5 to 15 back then. 9.8's $140, which is a little higher than what it was last week. But now it's a $5 to $15 book. 9.8, $215 to $230 are the 2 sales recently. So most of the sales are raw, right in the same range. We got a little bit of climb though in 9.8 value, but not many sales. So we're gonna call it steady worth it. You could argue maybe I should call it up worth it because of the 9.8 bump, but there's only 2 sales. Hard to sell me on that when all the raw copies are basically going for that same price and really under $20. So next we have Star Wars Thrawn #6, the origin of Grand Admiral Thrawn. And this is on the list again for the second week in a row also. 25 to 30 back then, raw copies, 9.8, $130. Now it's a $15 to $35 book, so right in the same range, 9.8, 200, but that's only one sale, so hard to say there. It looks like I typed up Steady and I'll Be Back when I should have typed up Steady and Worth It on this one, because obviously a little increase on the 9.8, a couple sales on the higher end, even though there are sales on the lower end too, on the raw side. But yeah, a book that is basically going for that same range as it was back then. Next, what do we got left? We got some Sony stuff, a lot of Marvel stuff left. First up, we have Amazing Spider-Man number 210, first appearance of Madam Web. Back then, it was going for $25 to $75, 9.8, 800, both of which were still way down from initial news about that movie. I forget if we got a trailer or just some sort of images or something. I forget what it was. I put it on the list back in October. The movie has obviously come and went. It bombed at the box office, but the books kind of still spiked a little bit, or this book did. Now it's a $25 to $100 book raw, so yeah, that could just be some really nice copy selling. 9.8s have backed up a little bit, 700, so it's kind of a steady I'll Be Back, because most of the sales were kind of raw sales, but or lower graded slabs. But yeah, my guess is this is going to continue to drop back as we move further and further away from this movie. Next, we have Fantastic Four, number 353, the first appearance of Mobius. Loki Season 2 is coming out. Raw copies 35, 9.8, 84 to 150. All those numbers way, way down from Season 1 of Loki. And yeah, they've just continued to drop further. Now it's a $5 to $25 book raw. 9.8, 90 to 135. So down and I'll Be Back. Trapped really on the raw side, but I'll Be Back because the 9.8 sales are kind of covering the low end of the previous range. But yeah. Don't know if we'll ever see Mobius again, but I can't imagine this book continuing to even hold these values. Next, we got Marvel Tales, number 2 from 1965, the first reprint of X-Men 1. I'm not sure what was going on here. I think it was maybe X-Men 97 rumors, the fact that it's an affordable Silver Age version of X-Men as opposed to the actual X-Men number 1. I think there was a couple things causing people to kind of chase this book. Back then, raw copies were going for $20 to $120. A 5.5 sold for 5.5s were selling $80 to $100, which is pretty cheap when you really think about it for an early reprint like this. And I know went for $500. Now it's a $15 to $45 book. Yeah, that's dumpster fire on the upper end, but probably trap overall. 8.5 is the only recent slab sale here. It went for $128, which is just slightly more than the 5.5 and way less than the 9.0 from 6 months ago. So yeah, we're gonna call this a trap. And yeah, kind of would be a cool reprint to have if you were gonna have to settle for a reprint, but yeah, but it's not X-Men 1. All right, next, Dazzler on the list, since she was a lot around this time with all the Taylor Swift rumors. Dazzler, number 1 from 1981, her first solo series. Raw copies were $10, 9.8, 245. Now raw copies are $10 to $40, so that's up really on average. 9.8s are down, 150 to 200. So 9.8 sides are down, and I'll Be Back. If you want to say up, straight cash on the raw side at this point, maybe. I would guess, though, if the movie comes and goes and she doesn't appear, or even if she appears, this book is probably going to, overall, over the next 6 months to a year, trend downward from where it is even now. Next, we have X-Men 130, the first appearance of Dazzler. A book that I would say was historically undervalued is now way overvalued. 100 to 250 on raw copies, 9.8, $2,000. I mean, think of all the other characters you can get a 9.8 from this time period for less than $2,000 for a lot. Now raw copies are 1 to 200, 9.8, 1,000 to 1,500. So even with the rumors still going, this book is backed up. So another down and I'll Be Back. I mean, it's a good book. It's a great book, but I would not pay the crazy prices related to the Taylor Swift stuff that's going on with this book. All right, last book, Fantastic Four, number 48, first appearance of Silver Surfer. And yeah, I will say I looked up values before this week's news could have any effect on this book, but I really don't think long term it's going to have effect on a book like this. But anyway, back then 5.0s were going for 1,100, 9.6 went for 28,800. Now a 5.0 will cost you 12 to 17, so it's crept up, and that seems to be the case generally across almost all grades. The book has kind of been bouncing back. It went crazy in 2021, 2020. Had crashed pretty hard like most books had since then, but it's been bouncing back. That continued here. News or no news. 9.6, 25,200. So, but that's only one sale, and it's within kind of the range of where that one was before. I mean, that was an auction. So yeah, raw copies, 5 to 1,500 right now on eBay. So overall, we're going to call this up. This is a straight cash book, long-term and historically, and up across most grades, except for the very high-end stuff over the last 6 months. So that is this week's list. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time. Later.